The afternoon sun beat down on Clara Montgomery's shoulders as she rounded the corner of her father's barn, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron, only to freeze at the sight of Wyatt Brennan hunched over the whitewashed fence post with his hunting knife glinting in the Texas heat. She could see the careful strokes he was making, the concentration furrowing his brow, and as she stepped closer, her heart performed an odd little flip when she recognized the letters taking shape in the weathered wood. Clara. It was June of 1874 in Cottonwood Creek, a dusty cattle town about 60 miles northwest of San Antonio, and Clara had known Wyatt Brennan for exactly 3 months and 4 days, ever since he had ridden into town looking for work, and her father had hired him on at the ranch. He was 22 years old, lean and sun-bronzed, with dark hair that constantly fell across his forehead and eyes the color of summer grass. Clara herself had just turned 20 that spring, and though she had received attention from plenty of young men in Cottonwood Creek, none of them had ever made her pulse race quite the way Wyatt did when he tipped his hat to her in the mornings or when their hands accidentally brushed at the supper table. Now she stood not 10 feet away, watching him carve her name into the fence post that marked the eastern boundary of her father's property, and she did not know whether to slip away quietly or announce her presence. The decision was made for her when a twig snapped beneath her boot. Wyatt's head jerked up, and the color that flooded his face was immediate and unmistakable. His sun-darkened skin could not hide the deep crimson that spread from his collar to his hairline, turning his ears nearly scarlet. For a moment, Clara thought he might bolt or stammer an apology or try to cover the letters he had carved. Instead, after that initial moment of pure mortification, something shifted in his expression. His jaw set with determination, and though his face remained red as a summer sunset, he turned deliberately back to the fence post and kept carving. "That is my name you are working on there," Clara said, finding her voice despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes, ma'am," Wyatt replied, his voice rough. The knife continued its careful path through the wood. "I reckon you can see that plain enough." "Most men would stop when they got caught doing something like that," Clara observed, taking a few steps closer. She could see the fine tremor in his hands now, the way his shoulders were tense beneath his faded blue work shirt, but still he carved. "I figured I had already been caught," Wyatt said, blowing wood shavings away from the letters. "Stopping now would not change that. Might as well finish what I started." Clara moved close enough now to see the full extent of his work. Her name was carved in neat, careful letters, each one taking up about 3 inches of space. Below her first name, she could see he had begun working on her surname. The craftsmanship was surprisingly delicate for a man who spent his days roping cattle and mending fences. "Why my name?" she asked softly. Wyatt's hands finally stilled. He did not look at her, but she saw his throat work as he swallowed. "I had been thinking on you," he admitted. "More than I probably should. More than is maybe proper for a ranch hand to be thinking about his employer's daughter. I was out here fixing this section of fence and I just started carving without really meaning to. Once I started, I could not seem to stop. Even after I caught you," Clara said. "Especially after you caught me." Now he did look at her, and the intensity in those green eyes made her breath catch. "Figure I might get fired for this. Your father might run me off the property. But I have spent 3 months trying to work up the courage to tell you how I feel, and I have been failing at it every single day. So maybe this is how I tell you. Maybe I carve your name into this fence post, and you know that I think about you from sunup to sundown. That when I am in the bunkhouse at night, I am wondering if you are looking at the same stars through your bedroom window. That every morning when you bring coffee out to the hands, I wait to see if you will smile at me, and when you do, it is the best part of my day." Clara felt warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the Texas sun. She had suspected that Wyatt might harbor some feelings for her. There had been looks exchanged across the dinner table, moments when they found themselves alone and the air seemed to thicken with unspoken words. But hearing him say it aloud, with his face still flushed and his eyes never leaving hers, was something else entirely. "My father would not be pleased," she said carefully. "I know it." Wyatt looked back at the fence post. "I do not have much to offer. I have got a good horse, my saddle, and about $40 saved up from my wages. I am decent with cattle and can fix most anything that breaks. But I do not have land or prospects beyond working for someone else. I have got no right to be carving your name into anything, let alone thinking about a future that includes you." "You did not let me finish," Clara interrupted. "My father would not be pleased if he knew you had feelings for me and did not do anything about them. He has been grumbling for months about how I turned down the banker's son and the blacksmith's nephew. He thinks I am too particular." Wyatt's eyes snapped back to her face. "Are you saying—" "I am saying that I bring coffee out to the hands every morning specifically so I can see you," Clara said, and felt her own cheeks heating now. "I am saying that I volunteer to call the men in for supper because it gives me an excuse to walk out to wherever you are working. I am saying that you are not the only one who has been thinking more than is probably proper." The knife slipped from Wyatt's fingers and landed in the dust at his feet. He straightened slowly, wiping his palms on his denim trousers. "Miss Clara, I need you to be clear with me right now because I do not want to misunderstand. Are you telling me that you have feelings for me?" "I am telling you that when I saw you carving my name into that fence post, I did not feel angry or embarrassed," Clara said. "I felt something else entirely, something that made my heart speed up and my hands shake, something that made me want to see you finish carving it so I could look at it every day and remember this moment." Wyatt took a step toward her, then seemed to catch himself. "There are proper ways to go about this. I should talk to your father, ask his permission to court you." "You should," Clara agreed, "but maybe first you could finish carving my name." A smile broke across Wyatt's face, transforming his features from earnest and worried to something that made Clara's knees feel distinctly unsteady. He bent and retrieved his knife, then turned back to the fence post. Clara moved to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and watched as he carefully completed the letters of her surname. When he finished, he carved a small heart around the entire name, taking his time with the curved lines. Then, below it, he carved his own name. The act felt monumental somehow, like a declaration witnessed by the endless Texas sky and the prairie grass that stretched toward the horizon. "There," Wyatt said quietly. "Now anyone who comes by here will know." "Know what?" Clara asked. "That I am a man who is completely and totally taken with Clara Montgomery." He turned to face her fully. "And if I have my way, that will not ever change." Clara reached out and took his hand, lacing her flour-dusted fingers through his calloused ones. "Then you should probably go talk to my father. Right now," Wyatt looked suddenly panicked. "I am covered in dust and wood shavings. Should I clean up first, put on my better shirt?" "James Wyatt Brennan," Clara said, having learned his full name from the ranch ledger where her father recorded his workers' information. "If you do not go talk to him right now, I am going to march into that house and tell him myself that one of his ranch hands has been carving my name into fence posts, and that I am perfectly happy about it." Wyatt's hand tightened around hers. "You are something else, Clara Montgomery. You had better hope my father thinks I am something worth giving away to a cowboy with a good horse and $40, Clara replied, but she was smiling. They walked back toward the main house together, still holding hands. Clara's father, Thomas Montgomery, was a stern man who had built his ranch up from nothing after the war between the states. He had fought for Texas, come home to find his family's small farm in ruins, and spent 15 years working himself nearly to death to create something substantial. He loved his daughter fiercely, and Clara knew he had dreams of her marrying well, someone established who could provide for her without struggle. But Thomas Montgomery also prized honesty and hard work above almost everything else, and Wyatt Brennan had proven himself in both regards since arriving at the ranch. He was always the first one up in the morning and the last to turn in at night. He never complained about difficult tasks, and he had a way with horses that Thomas had commented on more than once. They found Thomas in the barn, checking on a mare who was due to foal any day. He looked up as they entered, his weathered face creasing into a frown when he saw their joined hands. "What is this?" he asked, straightening from where he had been running his hands along the mare's belly. "Sir, I would like permission to speak with you," Wyatt said. His voice was steady despite the fact that Clara could feel tension radiating through him. "About your daughter." Thomas's eyes moved from Wyatt to Clara and back again. "I see, Clara, give us a moment." "No," Clara said firmly. "Whatever Wyatt has to say, he can say it with me present." Her father's eyebrows rose, but after a moment he nodded. "All right then. Speak your piece, Brennan." Wyatt did not let go of Clara's hand. "Sir, I know I have only been working here a short while. I know I do not have much in the way of money or property. But I am a hard worker and I am honest, and I have feelings for your daughter that are serious and honorable. I would like your permission to court her proper, with the intention of marrying her if she will have me." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he said, "You have been carving her name into my fence posts." Clara's eyes widened. "How did you?" "I was riding the property line this morning and saw it," Thomas interrupted. "Fresh carving, and I recognized your knife work, Brennan. You did that repair on the barn door last week with that same knife, same neat cuts." He crossed his arms over his chest. "I have been waiting to see if you would have the courage to come talk to me, or if you were just going to moon over my daughter from a distance." "I was going to talk to you," Wyatt said. "I was working up to it, trying to figure out the right words." "And then I caught him finishing the carving," Clara added, "and I told him to come talk to you right away." A hint of amusement flickered across Thomas's face. "Did you now?" "I did. Because I have feelings for him too, Papa, and I am tired of pretending I do not. I have turned down other suitors because none of them made me feel the way Wyatt does, and if you tell me I cannot see him, I will be very unhappy about it." "Is that a fact?" Thomas looked at his daughter and his expression softened slightly. "You really care for this cowboy?" "I really do," Clara said simply. Thomas sighed heavily. "Your mother, God rest her soul, would probably tell me I am being too soft, but she also married me when I did not have 2 nickels to rub together, and we made it work through pure stubbornness and love." He fixed Wyatt with a hard stare. "You can court my daughter, but there will be rules. No being alone together without a chaperone. You treat her with respect at all times. And you keep working as hard as you have been, because if I am going to have you as a son-in-law eventually, I want to know you can provide for her." "Son-in-law," Clara breathed. "I am not blind, girl. I can see how you look at each other. If I let this courting happen, it is going to lead to marriage. Might as well acknowledge that from the start." Thomas turned his attention back to Wyatt. "One more thing. You hurt her and I will personally run you out of Texas. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir," Wyatt said. "And thank you. I promise you will not regret this." "I had better not." Thomas waved a hand at them. "Now get out of here. Clara, your Aunt Martha is waiting for help with the preserving. And Brennan, the north pasture fence needs work." They left the barn together, and once they were out of sight of the door, Wyatt let out a long breath. "I thought my heart was going to pound right out of my chest." "You were very brave," Clara said, "and Papa likes you, I could tell." "He tolerates me," Wyatt corrected. "And he loves you enough to let you court someone he probably thinks is beneath you." Clara stopped walking and turned to face him. "You are not beneath me, Wyatt Brennan. Do not ever say that again." The look in his eyes made her stomach flip. "Yes, ma'am." "Now walk me to the house like a proper gentleman courting a lady," Clara said, tucking her hand into the crook of his elbow. The next 3 months passed in a blur of carefully chaperoned meetings and stolen glances across the supper table. Wyatt courted Clara with a determination and tenderness that made her fall more deeply in love with him with each passing day. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, carefully arranged into bundles that she dried and kept in her room. He read to her from a book of poetry he borrowed from the circuit preacher, stumbling over some of the fancier words but making her heart melt with the effort. On Sundays, after church services in the small whitewashed building that served Cottonwood Creek, they would sit together on the Montgomery front porch with Clara's Aunt Martha in a rocking chair nearby, ostensibly knitting but mostly dozing in the afternoon heat. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and dreams. Wyatt told her about growing up in Missouri, the youngest of 5 children. His father had died when he was 12, kicked by a horse, and his mother had struggled to keep the family farm going. When Wyatt was 17, his oldest brother had married and taken over the farm, and Wyatt had struck out on his own to find work. He had drifted south, working various ranches, learning everything he could about cattle and horses. He had dreams of someday having a small spread of his own, nothing fancy, just enough land to run a modest herd and build a house. Clara told him about her mother, who had died of fever when Clara was 15. She spoke of how lost she had felt, suddenly responsible for running the household while her father threw himself into work to avoid his grief. She talked about her love of baking, how she found peace in the precise measurements and the way ingredients transformed into something wonderful. She confessed her fear that she would end up married to someone sensible and appropriate who did not make her feel truly alive. "You make me feel alive," she told him one Sunday afternoon in late September. The heat had finally broken, and there was a hint of autumn in the air. "Like I was only half awake before, and now everything is brighter and more real." Wyatt reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become familiar but still sent warmth through her entire body. "I know exactly what you mean. I feel like I have been searching for something without knowing what it was, and then I came to this ranch and there you were, like I had finally found home." Wyatt Brennan, that is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. "I have got plenty more where that came from," he said with a grin. "I have been practicing. Practicing? Well, I have been thinking about how I am going to propose to you, and I figure I should have something real pretty to say when I do." Clara's heart skipped. "You have been thinking about proposing?" "Clara Montgomery, I have been thinking about proposing since about the second day I knew you, when you brought lemonade out to the workers, and you laughed at something one of the other hands said. And I thought that I wanted to hear that laugh every day for the rest of my life." He squeezed her hand gently. "I am just waiting for the right moment, and maybe for another few months of wages saved up so I can buy you a proper ring." "I do not need a fancy ring," Clara said. "Maybe not, but you deserve one." "You deserve everything good in this world, and I am going to spend my life trying to give it to you." From her rocking chair, Aunt Martha let out a gentle snore, and they both laughed quietly. Wyatt leaned in closer, and Clara thought for a moment that he might kiss her, propriety be damned. But he was too honorable for that, and instead he pressed his lips gently to her forehead, a gesture that felt almost more intimate than a real kiss would have been. October brought cooler weather and the fall cattle drive. Thomas Montgomery's ranch was one of several in the area that pooled their herds and drove them south to the railhead in San Antonio. It was hard, dangerous work, and it meant Wyatt would be gone for nearly 3 weeks. The night before the drive, Clara walked out to the bunkhouse to bring coffee to the men as they prepared their gear. Wyatt was sitting on the steps, oiling his saddle, and he looked up with a smile when he saw her approaching. "Going to miss having coffee delivered right to me," he said, accepting the tin cup she offered. "I am going to miss you," Clara said quietly, glancing around to make sure they had a moment of relative privacy. The other ranch hands were inside the bunkhouse, their voices carrying through the open windows. 3 weeks, Wyatt said. "And then I will be back, with enough wages from the drive to buy that ring I have been saving for." Clara sat down beside him on the step, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Be careful out there. I know cattle drives can be dangerous." "I will be careful," he promised. "I have got something too important waiting for me here to take foolish risks." Wyatt, Clara hesitated, then plunged ahead. I love you. I know we have not said it in so many words before, but I do. I love you, and I need you to know that before you leave. The saddle leather slipped from Wyatt's hands. He set down his coffee cup very carefully, then turned to face her fully. Clara Montgomery, I love you more than I have got words to express. I love you with everything I am. And when I get back from this drive, I am going to ask you to marry me proper. But I want you to know right now that you have got my heart completely. They sat there on the bunkhouse steps as the sun set, hands clasped together, and made promises to each other in low voices. Promises to wait, to be true, to build a life together. When Clara finally returned to the house, her heart was full to bursting, and that night she pulled out paper and pen to begin a letter she could give Wyatt before he left in the morning. The cattle drive departed at dawn, a river of longhorns flowing south with whoops and calls from the drovers keeping them moving. Clara stood at the fence and watched until Wyatt was just a speck in the distance, then turned back to the house with determination. 3 weeks would pass quickly if she kept busy. She threw herself into preparations, working with Aunt Martha to begin sewing a wedding dress even though no formal proposal had been made yet. She reorganized the entire house, baked enough pies and bread to feed the remaining ranch hands twice over, and counted down the days with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. 2 weeks passed without incident. Then, on the 16th day, a rider came thundering up to the ranch, covered in dust and looking grim. Clara was in the kitchen when she heard the commotion, and she rushed outside to see her father talking urgently with the rider. What has happened? She demanded, her blood running cold at the expression on her father's face. Thomas turned to her, and she could see him choosing his words carefully. There has been trouble on the drive. Stampede. Some of the men were injured. Wyatt, Clara's voice came out as barely a whisper. He is all right, Thomas said quickly. But he got caught trying to turn the herd. Broken leg, the rider says. They have got him at a doctor's office in a town about 40 miles south of here, place called Cedar Springs. Clara did not wait to hear more. She turned and ran for the house, already pulling off her apron. I am going to him. Clara, wait, her father started, but she was already inside, grabbing her traveling bag and stuffing clothes into it. Aunt Martha appeared in the doorway of Clara's bedroom. Child, you cannot just run off by yourself. Then come with me, Clara said, but I am going to him, Aunt Martha. He is hurt and probably worried that I will hear about the stampede and fear the worst. I need him to know I am there. Within an hour, Clara and Aunt Martha were in the wagon with Thomas driving, heading south toward Cedar Springs. They traveled through the afternoon and into the evening, finally stopping at a way station to rest the horses. They set out again at first light and reached Cedar Springs just before noon on the 17th day. The town was small, just a main street with a few businesses and houses scattered around. The doctor's office was easy to find, a neat white building with a sign hanging outside. Clara practically leaped from the wagon before it had fully stopped, rushing up the steps and through the door. The doctor, a gray-haired man with kind eyes, looked up from his desk. Can I help you? Wyatt Brennan, Clara said breathlessly. I was told he is here. That he was injured in a stampede. Recognition dawned on the doctor's face. Ah, you must be Clara. He has been asking for you, kept insisting we send word to the Montgomery ranch. He stood and gestured toward a door. He is in the recovery room. The leg was a clean break and I said it yesterday. He should heal up fine with rest. Clara followed the doctor through the door and found herself in a small room with 3 beds. Wyatt was in the one by the window, his right leg splinted and propped up on pillows. His face was pale beneath his tan, and there were dark circles under his eyes, but when he saw her, relief flooded his features. Clara, he breathed, you are here. I was so worried. She crossed the room in 3 strides and took his hand, not caring about propriety or the doctor watching from the doorway. Of course I am here. Did you think a broken leg would keep me away? I thought you might not hear about it until I got back. or that you would hear about the stampede and think the worst. His hand gripped hers tightly. We lost 2 men, Clara, good men, and if I had been a few seconds slower, I would have been trampled instead of just knocked down. But you were not, Clara said firmly, sitting on the edge of the bed. You are here and you are going to heal, and that is what matters. The drive, Wyatt said, frustrated. I am going to lose my wages. I cannot work with this leg and the herd has to keep moving. The wages do not matter, Clara insisted. They do to me. Wyatt looked away, his jaw clenched. I needed that money for your ring, for proving to your father that I can provide for you properly. Wyatt, look at me. Clara waited until his eyes met hers. I do not care about a ring. I do not care about wages. I care about you. And when I thought you might be seriously hurt or worse, nothing else mattered. Do you understand? Nothing. I was going to propose as soon as I got back, he said quietly. I had it all planned out. I was going to take you back to that fence post where I carved your name, and I was going to get down on one knee proper and ask you to be my wife. Then ask me now, Clara said. Now, here? Wyatt looked around at the sparse recovery room. This is not how I wanted, James Wyatt Brennan. I do not care if you ask me in a palace or a barn or a doctor's recovery room. Ask me. A slow smile spread across Wyatt's face despite the pain Clara knew he must be feeling. I do not have a ring. I do not need a ring. And I am flat on my back with a broken leg. I do not need you on one knee. You are the stubbornest woman I have ever met, Wyatt said, but his eyes were bright with love and amusement. And you are stalling, Clara replied. Wyatt took both of her hands in his expression turning serious. Clara Montgomery, from the moment I met you, my life changed. You made me want to be better, to work harder, to become the kind of man who could deserve someone as wonderful as you. I know I do not have much to offer right now. I have got a good horse, a beat-up saddle, and apparently a broken leg. But I have got a heart that belongs completely to you and a determination to spend every day of my life making you happy. So even though this is not the romantic proposal I planned, I am asking you here and now, will you marry me? Yes, Clara said, her eyes filling with tears. Yes, absolutely yes. Wyatt pulled her down and kissed her, propriety forgotten, and Clara kissed him back with all the love and relief and joy she felt. From the doorway, she heard Aunt Martha's satisfied HMPH and the doctor's quiet chuckle, but she did not care. When they finally pulled apart, Wyatt was grinning despite the obvious discomfort he was in. I am going to buy you a ring as soon as I can. You will do no such thing, Clara said. Or rather, you will, but only when we can afford it without hardship. We are going to be practical and sensible. Practical and sensible, Wyatt repeated. All right, though I reserve the right to be impractical and foolish when it comes to loving you. I will allow that exception, Clara agreed. Over the next few days, Clara and Aunt Martha stayed in Cedar Springs while Wyatt recovered enough to travel. Thomas had returned to the ranch after the first day, needing to see to the property. But he left the wagon and promised to send word to the preacher that there would be a wedding as soon as Wyatt was able to stand for the ceremony. Clara spent her days at Wyatt's bedside, reading to him, talking with him, and helping him with the difficult process of learning to use crutches. The doctor was pleased with how well the leg was healing and assured them that, with proper care, Wyatt would have full use of it once the bone knit back together. You are lucky, the doctor told Wyatt on the 5th day. I have seen stampede injuries before. Most are not as clean as this. I figure I used up a lifetime of luck getting thrown clear instead of getting trampled, Wyatt replied. And then I got more luck when Clara showed up to put up with me being useless. You are not useless, Clara said firmly. You are healing. On the 6th day, the doctor pronounced Wyatt well enough to travel if they went slowly and carefully. The journey back to Cottonwood Creek took 2 full days, with frequent stops for Wyatt to rest his leg. By the time they pulled up to the Montgomery ranch house, Clara was exhausted but deeply relieved to be home. Her father came out to greet them, and his expression softened when he saw Wyatt carefully maneuvering himself out of the wagon on crutches. Good to have you back, son. We have been keeping your bunk ready. Actually, sir, there is something we need to tell you, Wyatt said. He glanced at Clara, who moved to stand beside him. I proposed to Clara while I was recovering in Cedar Springs, and she said yes. We would like to get married as soon as possible if you will give us your blessing. Thomas looked between them for a long moment, then sighed. I suppose I should have seen this coming from the moment you started carving her name into my fence posts. His stern expression cracked into something warmer. You have my blessing, Brennan, and you have got a place here on this ranch for as long as you want it. I have been thinking, once you are healed up and married, there is a section of the property to the east that would be good for building a small house. Consider it a wedding gift. Sir, I cannot accept, Wyatt started, but Thomas held up a hand. You are going to be my son-in-law. That makes you family, and I take care of family. Besides, I want my daughter close by, and I want to know that you two have a proper start. So you will accept the land, and we will talk about you taking on more responsibilities around here. I am not getting any younger, and I could use a partner I trust. Wyatt looked stunned. I do not know what to say. Say thank you and let us get you inside before you fall over on those crutches, Thomas replied gruffly. Clara, your aunt has supper waiting. The wedding was planned for early November, giving Wyatt time to regain his strength and for proper arrangements to be made. Despite Clara's insistence that she did not need anything fancy, the women of Cottonwood Creek descended on the Montgomery ranch with offers of help. Mrs. Henderson from the general store provided fabric for decorations. The preacher's wife organized a group to prepare food for the reception. Even the dower, Mrs. Atkins, who ran the boarding house, contributed her late mother's silver service for the occasion. Wyatt worked with Thomas and the other ranch hands to begin clearing the land for the small house they would build come spring. His broken leg kept him from heavy labor, but he could plan and supervise, and he threw himself into the project with an enthusiasm that made Clara's heart swell with love. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, going over plans for their future. They talked about the house they would build, simple but sturdy, with a kitchen where Clara could bake and a big front porch for sitting together on warm evenings. They talked about the cattle they would raise, the horses they would breed, the children they hoped to have someday. I want at least 4, Wyatt said one evening about a week before the wedding. His leg was healing well, and he had graduated from crutches to a cane that he used only when tired. 4 children, Clara laughed. That is very specific. I come from a big family. I liked having brothers and sisters around, and I liked the idea of filling that house with noise and laughter. He took her hand, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. But I will be happy with whatever we are blessed with as long as I have you. 4 sounds good to me, Clara said softly, though you might change your mind after the first one. Never. Wyatt's expression turned serious. Clara, I know these past months have not gone the way either of us expected. With the stampede and my injury, we have had to adjust our plans more than once. But through it all, you have been steady and sure. You came to me in Cedar Springs without hesitation. You have never made me feel less than whole, even when I was laid up and helpless. I want you to know that I see that, and I appreciate it, and I am going to spend our married life being the kind of husband who deserves that kind of loyalty. Wyatt, you already are, Clara said, her eyes stinging with happy tears. You have shown me what it means to have a partner who is honest and true, who works hard and cares deeply, who makes me laugh and makes me think and makes me feel cherished. I could not ask for anything more. The wedding took place on a crisp November morning with the sky clear and blue overhead. The ceremony was held in the church, with what seemed like the entire town of Cottonwood Creek crammed into the small building. Clara wore the dress she and Aunt Martha had sewn, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Her father walked her down the aisle, his eyes suspiciously bright, and placed her hand in Wyatt's with a firm nod. Wyatt stood tall in a new suit, purchased with money borrowed from Thomas and to be paid back through work on the ranch. His leg was still tender, Clara knew, but he refused to use the cane for the ceremony. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world, and when the preacher asked if he took Clara to be his lawfully wedded wife, his "I do" rang out clear and strong. Clara's own vows were spoken with a voice that shook only slightly with emotion. When the preacher finally pronounced them man and wife, Wyatt kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak, and the congregation erupted into applause and cheers. The reception was held at the Montgomery Ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed 3 times the number of guests who attended. There was music from a fiddle player and an old ranch hand who could coax surprising melody from a battered harmonica. Clara danced with her father, with several of the ranch hands, and most importantly with her new husband, who held her close and whispered in her ear that he was the luckiest man in Texas. As the sun began to set, Wyatt took Clara's hand and led her away from the party, toward the eastern section of the property. She knew where they were going before they arrived at the whitewashed fence post with her name carved into it. "I wanted to see it again," Wyatt said, running his fingers over the carved letters. "To remember the day everything changed. The day I got caught carving your name and turned red as a beet but kept going anyway because I figured I might as well be honest about how I felt." "Best decision you ever made," Clara said, leaning against his side. "Nah, the best decision I made was riding into Cottonwood Creek looking for work last June, but this was a close second." Wyatt turned to face her, taking both her hands. "Clara Brennan, we are married now, you are my wife. And I still cannot quite believe it is real." "It is real," Clara assured him, "and I am not going anywhere. You are stuck with me now, Cowboy." "Being stuck with you sounds like the best possible life," Wyatt said, and kissed her as the Texas sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. They moved into the main house temporarily, taking over the guest room while their own house was being built. Thomas insisted there was no rush, but Wyatt was eager to have a place that was truly theirs. Through the winter, work on the house progressed whenever weather permitted. The foundation was laid in December. The framing went up in January, and by late February the roof was on and the walls were being completed. Clara spent the winter months settling into married life with a joy that surprised her with its intensity. She had expected to be happy, but she had not anticipated how deeply satisfying it would be to wake up next to Wyatt every morning, to share meals and conversation and quiet evenings by the fire. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, discovering small things like how Wyatt liked his coffee with just a touch of sugar, and how Clara always read for a few minutes before sleeping. In early March, Clara began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited a few weeks to be certain before telling Wyatt, wanting to be sure before she got his hopes up. When she finally shared the news one evening as they walked out to check on the progress of their house, Wyatt stopped dead in his tracks. "You are certain?" he asked, his voice tight with emotion. "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor," Clara confirmed. "I think the baby will come sometime in October." Wyatt let out a whoop that probably carried all the way back to the main house and swept Clara into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "Clara, we are going to have a baby." "We are," she agreed, her own eyes damp. "Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. Wyatt placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "There is a person in there, a person we made together, our son or daughter." "I am glad you are pleased," Clara said. "I was fairly sure you would be, but there is always a moment of nervousness before telling someone news like this." "Pleased, thrilled, overjoyed, any word you want to use," Wyatt said. He knelt down suddenly, pressing his ear to her stomach. "Can you hear me in there? This is your papa talking. I am going to love you so much, little one. You and your mama are my whole world." Clara ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man who was so unabashedly emotional about their baby. "Come on, let us go tell Papa. He is going to be a grandfather." Thomas Montgomery's reaction to the news of his impending grandparenthood was more subdued than Wyatt's had been, but Clara could see the pleasure in his eyes. "A baby," he said gruffly. "That is fine news, very fine news indeed." He cleared his throat. "I suppose we should work on getting that house finished up quickly now. You will need a nursery." "We will have time," Clara assured him. "The baby is not due until fall." But Thomas was insistent, and with his urging, work on the house accelerated. By early April, it was ready for occupancy. A sturdy two-room structure with a bedroom, a combined kitchen and living area, and the promise of additions to be built as needed and money allowed. It was simple and small, but Clara loved it instantly. They moved in on a warm spring afternoon with help from the ranch hands to transport their few belongings. Clara had a proper stove for cooking, a gift from her father. Aunt Martha had provided linens and dishes. Various townspeople had contributed small household items as belated wedding gifts. By evening, the little house felt like a home. That night, lying in bed with Wyatt's arm around her and his hand resting on her belly, Clara felt a contentment so profound it almost frightened her. "I am so happy," she whispered. "Is it wrong to be this happy? Like maybe I am tempting fate by acknowledging it." "It is not wrong," Wyatt said firmly. "We have worked for this happiness, Clara. We have made choices and taken risks and trusted each other. We deserve to enjoy what we have built together." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And we are going to keep building. This house, this family, this life, all of it together." The spring passed into summer, and Clara's pregnancy progressed normally. She continued to help around the ranch, though Wyatt and her father were both overly cautious about letting her do anything they deemed too strenuous. She focused on baking and cooking, on sewing baby clothes with Aunt Martha, on preparing for the arrival of their child. In June, on the anniversary of the day they met, Wyatt surprised Clara by taking her back to the fence post where he had carved her name. In the year since that fateful afternoon, the carving had weathered slightly but remained clearly visible. Below their names, Wyatt had added something new, a date, June 14, 1874, and below that, the day my life truly started. "I carved it this morning before you woke up," Wyatt explained. "I wanted to mark the occasion, 1 year since I met you, 1 year since everything changed." "It has been quite a year," Clara said, running her fingers over the new carving. "We have courted and married and are about to become parents. Sometimes it feels like it has all happened so fast. And sometimes it feels like I have known you forever," Wyatt added. He pulled something from his pocket. "I have something for you." It was a small box, and when Clara opened it, she found a simple gold band inside, a tiny diamond chip set into the metal. "Wyatt, I told you that you did not need to buy me a ring." "I know what you said, but I wanted to. I have been saving up from my wages, and I went into San Antonio last week to find this. It is not much, but it is a proper engagement ring, even if I am giving it to you after we are already married." He took the ring and slipped it onto her finger above her plain wedding band. "There. Now you have both." Clara looked at the ring sparkling in the sunlight, then up at her husband's earnest face. "It is perfect, you are perfect, and I love you so much I can hardly stand it sometimes." "That is good," Wyatt said with a grin, "because you are stuck with me for a very long time, Mrs. Brennan." In late October, as the leaves on the cottonwood trees turned gold and the air carried a hint of coming winter, Clara went into labor. It was a long, difficult process that lasted through the night and into the following day. Wyatt paced outside the bedroom where the midwife and Aunt Martha attended to Clara, his face drawn with worry every time he heard her cry out. Thomas sat with him, offering quiet reassurance. "Women have been doing this since the dawn of time. Clara is strong, she will be fine." "I know," Wyatt said, but his hands shook as he gripped his coffee cup. "But knowing it and living through it are different things. If anything happens to her, nothing is going to happen to her," Thomas interrupted firmly. "Have faith, son." Finally, in the early afternoon, a baby's cry rang out from the bedroom. Wyatt was on his feet instantly, moving toward the door. It opened before he reached it, and Aunt Martha emerged with a tired but triumphant smile. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy baby boy, and Clara is fine." Exhausted, but fine. Wyatt did not wait to hear more. He pushed past Aunt Martha into the bedroom where Clara lay propped up on pillows, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat and her face pale but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. "Wyatt," she said softly, "come meet your son." He crossed to the bed on shaking legs and sat carefully on the edge, looking down at the small face peeking out from the blankets. His son. He had a son. The reality of it hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath. "He is perfect," Wyatt managed, his voice rough. "Clara, he is absolutely perfect." "He has your nose," Clara observed with a tired smile, "and quite a set of lungs. You heard him crying, I am sure." "I heard." Wyatt reached out and gently touched the baby's tiny hand, marveling when small fingers curled around one of his. "Hello there, little man. I am your papa, and this is your mama, who is the bravest, strongest woman in the whole world." The midwife bustled around, checking on Clara and issuing instructions about feeding and care. Thomas and Aunt Martha came in to meet their grandson and great-nephew, exclaiming over the baby's features and arguing good-naturedly about whether he looked more like Clara or Wyatt. But through it all, Wyatt could not take his eyes off his wife and son. His family. A year and a half ago, he had been drifting from ranch to ranch with no real ties or direction. Now he had a wife he adored, a son he already loved fiercely, a home of his own, and a future that stretched out bright and promising before him. "What should we name him?" Clara asked. "We talked about names, but we never quite decided." "What about Thomas?" Wyatt suggested, glancing at Clara's father. "After your papa." Thomas's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "You do not have to do that." "We want to," Clara said firmly. "You gave us so much, Papa. You gave Wyatt a chance when he was just a drifter looking for work. You gave us land to build our home. You have supported us every step of the way. Thomas is a good, strong name." "Thomas Brennan," Wyatt said, trying it out. "I like it. What do you think, little one? Does that suit you?" The baby made a small snuffling sound and they all laughed. "I think that is approval," Clara declared. Over the next weeks, they settled into the exhausting, exhilarating reality of life with a newborn. Thomas was a colicky baby who seemed to prefer being awake at night, and Clara and Wyatt took turns walking the floor with him, singing soft songs and murmuring reassurances. They were both perpetually tired, but there was a joy underlying the exhaustion that made it bearable. Wyatt proved to be a devoted father, never complaining about dirty diapers or sleepless nights. He would hold Thomas for hours, talking to him about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together when Thomas was older. Clara would often find them like that, Wyatt sitting in the rocking chair they had placed in the main room, the baby cradled against his chest, both of them dozing. Winter came, cold and sometimes harsh, but the little house stayed warm with the help of the good stove and careful attention to the fire. Clara baked bread and pies, the familiar rhythms of cooking helping to ground her during the chaotic early months of motherhood. Wyatt worked the ranch alongside Thomas Montgomery and the other hands, coming home each evening to his family with a smile that never seemed to fade. On Christmas, they celebrated with a small tree that Wyatt had cut from the property and a handful of gifts. Clara gave Wyatt a new work shirt she had sewn herself. Wyatt gave Clara a beautiful handmade cradle he had been working on in secret, carved with delicate scrollwork and sturdy enough to last for all the children they hoped to have. For baby Thomas, there were knitted blankets from Aunt Martha and a small carved horse from Grandfather Thomas. "This is the best Christmas of my life," Wyatt said that evening as they sat together by the fire, Clara nursing the baby while Wyatt's arm wrapped around them both. "Better than I could have ever imagined when I was younger. It is only going to get better," Clara promised. "As Thomas grows, as we add to our family, as we build our life together, this is just the beginning." The years that followed proved Clara right. By the time Thomas was 2, Clara was pregnant again, and in the summer of 1877 they welcomed a daughter they named Rose. She was a quieter baby than Thomas had been, with Clara's dark hair and Wyatt's green eyes, and her older brother was instantly smitten with her. They added rooms to the house as their family grew and finances allowed. Wyatt took on more responsibility at the ranch, eventually becoming Thomas Montgomery's official partner in the operation. He had a gift for business that surprised everyone, including himself, and under his and Thomas's joint leadership, the ranch prospered. In 1879, their second daughter was born, Martha, named for Clara's beloved aunt who had passed away peacefully in her sleep earlier that year. And in 1881, they welcomed their fourth child, another son they named William. The house that had started as 2 small rooms was now a sprawling structure with multiple bedrooms, a large kitchen where Clara reigned supreme, and a wide porch where the family gathered on summer evenings. The fence post where Wyatt had first carved Clara's name was now on their own property, Thomas Montgomery having officially deeded that section to them. They kept it maintained, touching up the carving when weather threatened to erase it, keeping it as a reminder of where their story began. Through the years, Clara and Wyatt's love only deepened. They had their disagreements, as any married couple did, but they had learned to communicate, to listen, to compromise. They faced challenges together, drought years that threatened the cattle, illnesses that swept through the household, the normal trials of raising children. But they faced everything side by side, partners in the truest sense. Thomas Montgomery lived to see all 4 of his grandchildren born, and to watch his daughter and son-in-law build something substantial together. He passed away in the winter of 1883, peacefully in his sleep, and was buried in the Cottonwood Creek cemetery with a stone that marked him as a beloved father and grandfather. In his will, he left the entire ranch to Clara and Wyatt jointly, trusting them to continue what he had started. The responsibility was enormous, but they rose to meet it. Wyatt had learned ranching from the ground up, and with Clara's organizational skills and head for numbers, they made a formidable team. They hired good men, treated them fairly, and slowly built the Montgomery Brennan Ranch into one of the most respected operations in that part of Texas. Through it all, there was love. Love between husband and wife, between parents and children, among siblings. The house was always filled with noise and laughter, with the chaos of a large family and the warmth of people who genuinely cared for each other. On a June afternoon in 1884, exactly 10 years after the day they met, Clara and Wyatt walked out to the fence post together while their children played in the yard under the supervision of a hired girl. Thomas was 9 now, Rose was 7, Martha was 5, and William was 3, and they were a loud, energetic bunch who kept their parents constantly busy. 10 years, Clara said, looking at the carved names on the fence post. I can hardly believe it has been that long. Best 10 years of my life, Wyatt said, slipping his arm around her waist. There was silver threading through his dark hair now, and lines crinkled at the corners of his eyes from years of squinting into the Texas sun, but to Clara, he was just as handsome as he had been at 22. Mine too, she agreed. Though I will admit, some days I wonder how we ended up with 4 children and an entire ranch to run when 10 years ago you were just a cowboy carving my name into a fence post. I was a cowboy who was completely in love with you even then, Wyatt corrected. I just did not have the words to tell you yet, or the courage until you caught me, and I figured I might as well see it through. Best decision you could have made, Clara said, echoing words from long ago. Not stopping, I mean. If you had run off embarrassed, who knows what would have happened. I would have found another way to tell you how I felt, Wyatt said with certainty. I was determined, even if I was scared, you were worth being brave for. He turned to face her, taking both her hands. You still are. Every day, you are worth being brave for, worth working hard for, worth building a life with. You have given me a beautiful life, Wyatt Brennan, Clara said softly. 4 wonderful children, a home I love, work that matters, and a partnership that makes me stronger. I could not have asked for more. How about a fifth child? Wyatt asked, his eyes twinkling. You said you wanted 4, but I am partial to odd numbers, Clara laughed. We will see what happens. The Lord blesses us in His own time. She looked back at the fence post, at their carved names weathered by 10 years of Texas seasons but still clearly visible. We should teach the children about this, about how we started. I want them to know that their parents chose each other, that we built this life deliberately and with love. Thomas has already been asking questions about how we met, Wyatt said. I told him I carved your name in wood and you caught me at it. He thought that was highly amusing. What did you tell him happened next? I told him that his mama was kind enough not to laugh at me and smart enough to realize I was a good man beneath the embarrassment, and that she gave me a chance to prove myself, which I have been doing every day since. Clara leaned her head against Wyatt's shoulder, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. From the house, she could hear her children's laughter carrying on the breeze, and she thought about how blessed she was. 10 years ago, she had been a ranch owner's daughter, uncertain about her future and turning down proposals from men who did not make her heart sing. Then a cowboy with kind eyes and a knife had carved her name into a fence post, and everything had changed. I love you, she said simply. Today, tomorrow, always. You and those 4 loud children and this life we built together. I love you too, Wyatt replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. More than words can express, which is why I had to carve your name in wood in the first place. Some things are too big for just saying out loud. They need to be made permanent, carved where they cannot be erased. They stood there together as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, 2 people who had found each other against the backdrop of the wild Texas prairie. Behind them, their house stood solid and welcoming. Before them, the land stretched out rich with possibility. And between them was a love that had been tested by time and trial and had only grown stronger. As they walked back toward the house hand in hand, Clara thought about the young woman she had been 10 years ago, watching a red-faced cowboy carve her name and feeling her heart make a decision her mind had not yet caught up to. She thought about all the moments that had brought them here, the courtship and the stampede, the proposal in a doctor's office, the wedding and the babies, the laughter and occasional tears, the daily choices to love and support each other. What are you thinking about? Wyatt asked, noticing her contemplative expression. That I would do it all again, Clara said. Every moment, every choice, every challenge. I would catch you carving my name into that fence post 1,000 times over if it meant ending up here with you, with this family, with this life. Good, Wyatt said, squeezing her hand. Because you are stuck with me, remember, for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and health, until death do us part. I remember, Clara said, smiling up at him, and I do not intend to forget. The years continued to pass, bringing more joys and some sorrows. Young Thomas grew into a serious, responsible young man who showed an early aptitude for ranching. Rose became an accomplished horsewoman with a particular gift for training difficult horses. Martha inherited Clara's love of cooking and could often be found in the kitchen, experimenting with recipes. William, the baby, was the most adventurous of the bunch, always exploring the furthest corners of the property and bringing home interesting rocks or injured animals he hoped to nurse back to health. In 1886, Clara's 5th pregnancy ended in a miscarriage, a loss that devastated both her and Wyatt. They grieved together, holding each other through the pain, and leaned on their children's innocent joy to help them heal. A year later, Clara became pregnant again, and this time she carried to term, delivering a healthy daughter they named Grace in the spring of 1888. Grace's birth felt like a gift, a reminder that life continued and brought blessings even after sorrow. She was a happy baby who seemed to smile at everything, and her arrival brought renewed joy to the household. The older children doted on her, and Wyatt, who had been worried about Clara through the entire pregnancy, relaxed once she was safely delivered. 5 children, Clara said one evening, watching Wyatt rock baby Grace to sleep. "I never imagined I would have 5. "You always did say we would see what the Lord blessed us with," Wyatt reminded her. "I think he has been mighty generous." By 1890, the ranch was thriving. They had expanded their holdings, purchasing additional land from a neighboring rancher who had decided to move back east. They employed a dozen men full-time and took on extra hands during busy seasons. The house had grown again to accommodate their large family, and they had built a proper barn and stable to house their growing number of horses. Thomas turned 16 that year and officially began working the ranch alongside his father, learning the business from the ground up just as Wyatt had. He was a hard worker with a good head on his shoulders, and both Clara and Wyatt were proud of the young man he was becoming. Rose, at 14, shocked them by announcing she wanted to train as a teacher. "I love the horses," she explained, "but I love learning more, and there are so many children in Cottonwood Creek and the surrounding ranches who do not get proper schooling. I want to help with that." Clara and Wyatt discussed it at length and ultimately decided to support Rose's ambitions. They arranged for her to study with the current schoolteacher, Mrs. Lawson, who was thrilled to have an apprentice. Rose threw herself into her studies with characteristic determination. Martha, at 12, was already helping Clara manage the household and had taken over much of the cooking. She had a calm, steady presence that made her a natural caretaker, often looking after her younger siblings when Clara and Wyatt were occupied with ranch business. William, at 10, remained the family adventurer. He kept them on their toes with his various schemes and explorations, but he had a good heart and was never malicious in his mischief. And Grace, at 2, was the darling of the family, spoiled equally by parents and older siblings alike. On their 16th wedding anniversary, Wyatt surprised Clara with a trip to San Antonio, leaving the children in the capable care of Thomas and a trusted ranch hand. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch together since their honeymoon, and Clara felt oddly young again as they checked into a hotel and explored the growing city. "This feels strange," she admitted as they walked through the busy streets, "being just the two of us again." "Strange good or strange bad?" Wyatt asked, keeping her hand tucked into the crook of his elbow. "Strange good," Clara decided. "I love our children dearly, but it is nice to remember what it was like when it was just you and me." They attended a real theater performance, ate at a restaurant where someone else did the cooking and serving, and spent a night in a hotel bed that was not interrupted by children's nightmares or early morning demands for breakfast. It was, Clara thought, absolutely perfect. On their last evening before returning home, they sat on the hotel balcony watching the sun set over San Antonio. "Thank you for this," Clara said, "for remembering that we are husband and wife, not just mama and papa." "I never forget that," Wyatt said seriously. "Clara, you are my wife before anything else. The woman I fell in love with, the woman I carved into a fence post because I could not keep my feelings contained. Everything else, the ranch, the children, all of it grew from that foundation, from us loving each other." "I feel the same way," Clara said. "Some women I know seem to lose themselves in motherhood and household management, but you have never let me disappear. You have always seen me, Clara, not just as mother or rancher's wife, but as me." "I always will," Wyatt promised. 50 years from now, when we are old and gray and the children are grown with families of their own, I will still see you exactly as you are. My Clara, the woman who caught me at that fence post and changed my life forever." They returned to the ranch refreshed and reconnected, much to the relief of their children, who had managed well enough but were glad to have their parents home. Life settled back into its familiar rhythms, the seasons passing with their predictable cycle of work and celebration. In 1894, Thomas shocked them by announcing he wanted to marry. At 19, he had been courting Sarah Mitchell, daughter of a rancher from a neighboring county, for over a year. Sarah was a sensible girl with a good head on her shoulders, and both Clara and Wyatt liked her immensely. They gave their blessing, and the wedding was held in September, a joyful celebration that reminded Clara and Wyatt of their own wedding 20 years earlier. Thomas and Sarah moved into a small house on the far eastern edge of the ranch property, and Thomas continued to work alongside his father. Within a year, they announced they were expecting their first child, making Clara and Wyatt grandparents for the first time at the ages of 40 and 42, respectively. "Grandparents," Clara said wonderingly when Thomas shared the news. "How did we get old enough to be grandparents?" "We are not old," Wyatt protested. "We are experienced. There is a difference." But watching Thomas with Sarah, seeing the same love and excitement they had felt with their own first pregnancy, made Clara realize just how much time had passed. It felt like yesterday that she had caught Wyatt at the fence post, but it had been 20 years. 2 decades of marriage, of building a life together, of raising children and running a ranch and loving each other through all of it. The grandchild, a boy named James, was born in early 1896. Holding him for the first time, Clara was transported back to the afternoon she had first held her own Thomas, remembering Wyatt's awed expression and the way her heart had expanded to make room for this new person. "He looks just like Thomas did," she told Sarah. "The same nose and chin." "Thomas says he has your eyes," Sarah replied. She looked tired but radiantly happy. "Thank you for raising such a good man, Clara. I am so grateful to have married into this family." Clara blinked back tears. "You are a blessing to us, Sarah, and this little one is already so loved." As she watched Wyatt hold his grandson, his face soft with emotion, Clara felt a profound gratitude for the life they had built. It had not always been easy. There had been lean years and difficult times, illnesses and disappointments. But through it all, they had each other, and that had made all the difference. By 1900, as the new century dawned, the Brennan family had grown substantially. Rose had become the schoolteacher for Cottonwood Creek, beloved by her students and respected by the community. Martha had married a young doctor who had set up practice in town, and they lived in a neat house on Main Street. William, at 19, had surprised everyone by showing an interest in law and was studying with a lawyer in San Antonio, coming home on weekends when he could. Grace, at 12, was showing signs of inheriting her father's business acumen and often helped with the ranch accounts. Thomas and Sarah had 3 children now, with another on the way. The ranch house Clara and Wyatt had built all those years ago was the center of a sprawling family that gathered for Sunday dinners and holidays, filling the rooms with noise and love and laughter. Clara and Wyatt, now in their mid-40s, had settled into a comfortable rhythm. They still worked the ranch, but had handed over many of the day-to-day responsibilities to Thomas. They had time now for long walks across the property, for sitting on the porch in the evenings, for remembering where they had started and marveling at where they had ended up. One summer afternoon in 1900, Clara suggested they walk out to the fence post. It had been years since they had visited it specifically, though they passed it regularly during their walks. When they reached it, they found the carving worn but still visible, the letters of their names carved into the wood all those years ago. 26 years, Wyatt said, running his fingers over the faded carving. "Since the day I carved this and you caught me at it." "The best accident that ever happened," Clara said. "What if I had not walked around that corner just then? What if you had finished before I arrived?" "I would have found another way," Wyatt said, as he had said many times before. "I was determined. Terrified but determined." He pulled out his pocket knife, the same one he had used to carve her name all those years ago. "What do you say we refresh this? Make sure it lasts another 26 years. Clara watched as Wyatt carefully retraced the letters of her name, then his own, then the heart that surrounded them both. He added something new this time, their wedding date, and below it, forever. "There," he said, stepping back to admire his work. "That should last a good long while." "Forever," Clara read aloud. "That is a very long time." "Not nearly long enough," Wyatt replied. "I could have 1,000 lifetimes with you, and it would not be enough." Clara leaned against him, his arm coming automatically around her shoulders. You have always been romantic, Wyatt Brennan. Even when you were a red-faced cowboy caught carving my name, you were romantic at heart. Only for you, Wyatt said. You are the only person who ever inspired poetry in my soul, even if I am not very good at expressing it. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun make its way across the Texas sky. Around them, the prairie stretched out endless and beautiful, marked here and there by the signs of their life's work: fences and buildings, grazing cattle, cultivated gardens. But this spot, this simple fence post with their names carved into it, remained the heart of everything. The place where it all began, where a cowboy's brave gesture and a woman's open heart had created something lasting. I want to bring the grandchildren here, Clara said suddenly. I want them to know this story. About how their grandpa carved my name and got caught, and how that moment of honest feeling started everything. That is a fine idea, Wyatt agreed, though we might want to leave out the part where I turned red as a beet. Absolutely not, Clara said with a laugh. That is the best part. It shows you were human and nervous and brave all at once. That is important for them to know. That real love is not always smooth or practiced. Sometimes it is messy and embarrassing and wonderful all at once. When you put it that way, I suppose you are right, Wyatt conceded. All right, we will tell them the whole story, embarrassment and all. As the years continued to pass, they did exactly that. The fence post with the carved names became something of a family landmark, a place where the story of Clara and Wyatt was told to each new generation. The grandchildren would visit it on their birthday trips to the ranch, running their fingers over the carved letters while Clara and Wyatt shared the tale of how they fell in love. By 1910, Clara and Wyatt were in their 50s, grandparents many times over and still deeply in love. Their hair was more gray than not now, and they moved a bit slower than they once had, but their connection remained as strong as ever. They had weathered decades together, facing trials and celebrating triumphs, and their love had only deepened with time. On a warm June afternoon, 50 years after the day they first met, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren filled the house and yard. There was music and dancing, an enormous feast prepared by Martha and her daughters, and a general atmosphere of joy. As the sun began to set, Clara and Wyatt slipped away from the party, walking hand in hand to the fence post. It had been maintained over the years, the carving refreshed whenever it threatened to fade, and it stood as a testament to their enduring love. 50 years, Clara said wonderingly. Half a century since you carved my name here. Best thing I ever did, Wyatt said. Well, second best. The actual best thing was finishing the carving even after you caught me. That took real courage, Clara laughed, the sound as bright and genuine as it had been when she was 20. You have been dining out on that story for decades, Wyatt Brennan. It is a good story, he defended. And it is true. I could have run off embarrassed, but I stayed, I kept carving. And because I did, I got the greatest gift of my life, you, a family, a home, everything I ever dreamed of and more. I got all that too, Clara said softly. And it started here, with a cowboy who was brave enough to carve his feelings into wood and keep going even when he got caught. Wyatt turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. The hands that held hers were weathered now, marked by decades of hard work, but they were as gentle and sure as they had been when he first took her hand all those years ago. Clara Brennan, I love you just as much today as I did the day I married you. More even, because now I know exactly what a gift it is to share a life with someone. To build something together, brick by brick and day by day. To weather storms and celebrate sunshine. To grow old with someone and not mind the gray hair or the creaky knees because you are growing old together. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I love you too, Wyatt, so much. Thank you for being brave enough to carve my name. Thank you for not running away when I caught you. Thank you for every day we have had together. They kissed as the sun set. Two people who had loved each other for half a century and would continue loving each other for whatever time they had left. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of their family celebrating, the laughter of children and grandchildren, the continuation of the legacy they had built together. When they finally walked back to the party, hand in hand as always, they were greeted with cheers and applause. Thomas, their eldest, now 42 years old with his own grown children, raised a glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "Who taught us what real love looks like? Who showed us that a strong marriage and a strong family are built on honesty, hard work, and choosing each other every single day? Mom, Dad, thank you for the example you have set. Thank you for this family you created. And thank you for that fence post with your names carved in it, which started everything." Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the toast. Clara looked around at the faces of her children and grandchildren, at the ranch that she and Wyatt had built together, at the life they had created from a simple moment of courage at a fence post, and felt completely, perfectly content. This was what they had worked for, what they had dreamed of during those early days when they were just starting out. This abundance of love and family, this legacy of hard work and faithfulness, this proof that a love story that started with carved names could grow into something magnificent and enduring. That night, after all the guests had left and the house was quiet, Clara and Wyatt lay in bed together, the familiar comfort of their shared space wrapping around them. "It has been a good life," Clara said softly. "The best," Wyatt agreed. "And you know what? I would do it all again. Every moment, every choice, every day, even turning red as a beet at that fence post," Clara teased. "Especially that," Wyatt said firmly. "That was the moment everything changed, the moment I stopped being afraid and just let my feelings show, and it gave me everything." He turned to face her in the darkness. "Thank you for catching me, Clara. Thank you for not laughing or running away. Thank you for seeing past the embarrassment to the feelings underneath." "Thank you for not stopping," Clara replied, echoing words from long ago. "For keeping on carving even when you were caught. For being brave." They fell asleep that way, hands clasped between them. Two people who had spent 50 years building a life together and would continue doing so for as many years as they were granted. In the end, Clara and Wyatt Brennan were blessed with many more years together. They lived to see all their children married and settled, to welcome numerous grandchildren and great-grandchildren, to celebrate 60 years of marriage and then 65. They grew old together on the ranch they had built, working as long as they were able and then simply enjoying the results of their labor. The fence post with their carved names became a treasured family landmark, maintained carefully by each generation. Young couples in the family would come to it when they were courting, touching the carved letters and hoping for a love as enduring as Clara and Wyatt's. Children would play near it, absorbing the story of their grandparents beginning without fully understanding its significance until they were older. When Wyatt passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by family, Clara held his hand and whispered that she would love him forever. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Texas, a testament to the life he had lived and the people he had touched. Clara lived another 5 years after Wyatt's death, still sharp and engaged, still the matriarch of the sprawling Brennan family. She spent her final years sharing stories with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, making sure they knew their history and understood the foundation on which their family had been built. She insisted on being buried next to Wyatt in the Cottonwood Creek cemetery with a headstone that read simply, "Clara Montgomery Brennan, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She caught the cowboy at the fence post and they built a life together." And on the fence post itself, still standing on what was now prime Brennan Ranch land, the carved names remained visible, refreshed regularly by family members who wanted to honor the love story that had started it all. Clara and Wyatt's names, encircled by a heart, with dates marking their meeting and their wedding, and below it all, carved in Wyatt's careful hand all those years ago, one simple word: forever. It was a promise that had been kept, a love that had lasted, and a legacy that would continue for generations to come. All because a young cowboy had been brave enough to carve a woman's name into wood and when caught, had turned red but never stopped.